What is going on today, Cameron? What are you going to do?
Talking through multi-threading and how to do it. And I talked about it in my LinkedIn post. I don't know if I'm a pro, but I do feel like I've learned a ton, especially using GetAccept. So very excited to talk through that today.
Yeah, thank you guys for joining here today. I know in Europe times, at least, this is the big rush hour where everybody commutes from work, or they pick up kids, or they're trying to go into a supermarket where there's too many people. So really appreciate anybody that are joining. And from the US side, in your place, Cameron, it's early morning.
Yes, very early morning.
So the TechNext is with us here. I have the multi-threading expert, Cameron, and it's going to be so much fun. We have done a little bit of cheating before today, so we have prepped a little bit ahead and created like a full functioning digital sales room, like Cameron was going to sell GetAccept to GetAccept, but through selling Gong to GetAccept through a digital sales room. So that's also going to be something you can look forward to. We have a giveaway where you will receive the tips from Cameron, nicely written by my team and Cameron, edited. So you will access to that in a digital sales room after. And then we're going to go into very interesting details about how to multi-thread like a pro, how to share this strategic content to create valuable in between those meetings where we're trying to get the buyers engaged and keeping the momentum. But before we get into all that, I would love to hear you guys. Where are you tuning in from, guys and girls? What's going on? Where are you at? Have you joined from the early morning in the US, or are you more in the commuting side of Europe, or somewhere in between? We got Baro from Norway, and Ola from Sweden, Camille, Natalia from Denmark. That's great. So we have some Nordic representatives. No surprise there. Scott from Kansas City, Keith from UK, Magnus from Spain. Lovely. So good variety of people here. Berlin is tuning in. All right. So Cameron, really nice to have you here. I mean, you are one of the people that I've followed for some time now from Gong. I've seen you closed and really done well on your quarters. You're a 2x President Club winner, and I think last time you actually just won the mid-year and the President's Club. Not to brag or anything, but anyway, slow clap on that. That's amazing. I think today, I think a lot of people are tuning in because multi-threading is starting to become one of these things that we know we should do, but we don't necessarily know how to do it. And if we do it, are we stepping on anyone's toes? So I'm really looking forward to hear some of your best practices. But if anybody has any questions to Cameron, you can just throw them in the chat, and we will address them as we go whenever it makes sense. The agenda today, I'm just going to repeat it again because people are still tuning in. We're going to talk about mastering multi-threading. We're going to talk about how to create valuable steps by sharing strategic content through, for example, a digital sales room. And we're going to talk about how do you create this amazing relationship with people you even haven't met, because that's one of the things I feel Cameron is really good at. I've experienced this on my own situation here with having her talking to GetAccept. But briefly about your background, Cameron, what has been going on? What got you interested in working with sales, and specifically about digital sales rooms?
Yeah, definitely. So I graduated from Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo in 2020. And I had a business major and a sales minor. So I'd always been really interested in sales. My whole family's always done it. And so when I graduated, it was during COVID. And so I had gotten really lucky and gotten an SDR job at a tech company, was there for about 2.5 years, and then joined Gong 2 years ago. So I've always loved sales and always loved, I think, the idea of getting to more educate on what a product does and try to fit a need versus like push something. I think that's kind of always how I've seen sales. But I've been really interested in, Gong is, I'm sure people are aware of, such an incredible company for developing sales skills. It's like you are selling a sales product to sales leaders. And the talent is just like incredible there. People have so many different tips and tricks, and especially when it comes to really effective selling, and especially being able to get really being able to adapt to like an ever-changing sales world as well. Multi-threading is something that's been so top of mind for people. And so that's kind of my background and how I started to get, excited about it and interested in it, and, happy to kind of talk through how it's evolved from there too.
Yeah, because I think as we covered, and I can super sympathize with the fact of, working for a company that are selling to sales people. So every time you're being evaluated from a sales director, like, are you actually doing the sales job enough with the tool you're about to inspire them to use for selling better? But if we go into multi-threading, like, we're going to talk about, what is it, why is it important, how is it typically done, what are the downsides if you don't do it. You can make it hard to stand out. It's hard to engage if you only try to do it through single threading, as there's a term for today. And today, a lot of people, I think, as well, are also starting to see it really is important for keeping buyer momentum to keep sharing valuable stuff. I hope your dog is okay, Cameron.
He was snoring a little, so sorry if you guys can hear that.
Either way, I'm a dog person myself, so I'll just love it. But getting this right is one of those things that really can make you stand out from competitors, but also really ensure that you increase your win rate. And we're going to share some numbers later on this call about how big of a chance there really is connected to when you start to multi-thread after that first meeting, and how big of an impact it actually gives on your, for example, win rates. But we have a poll, I think, coming up right now, where we're actually going to ask you, like, do you use multi-threading today, where you essentially talk to more than one person in a sales process? The obvious answer will probably be yes, but I think it will be interesting to just see where are people today. Are people still hanging on to single threading is getting the job done? Are you doing it successfully, or are you doing it so-so? Just to get the temperature of things in the room, I see a little bit different numbers here. So 50% are doing it. That's great to hear. 53 now. 20% are not. So here's probably some interesting information for you. And then some are saying no, but we're going to start now. 27%. So 31 now. Okay. Let's see, maybe even more will go to convert to that side after this webinar. But it is something that I've started to talk a lot about with all the salespeople in my team. And it's something that I feel is something that has been a bit misunderstood, because people are afraid to step on anyone's toes. So if we were to just quickly set the scene here, multi-threading, the best practice if you were to not step on anyone's toes. Do you have like a tip to share here, so you don't feel like you're going over someone's head?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always tough. You have to assume that at some point you will. And I think the feedback that we get from Gong is that's okay. Like, if you do frustrate someone or you do reach out, it's an opportunity to get more collaborative and strategic with your particular champion. I'd say the biggest tip that I have is it's tough to build a champion in an organization, but once you do that, lean really heavily on them to say, like, is it okay to reach out to this person? Should I hold off? Like, get direction from them, because they obviously will know internally what's going on way better than you do. So I kind of snuck in 2 tips there, but I would say really lean on your champion, and it's okay if you do frustrate someone. I think as long as you're, apologetic and you move on and you do take the feedback that they give you, it's never too detrimental for a deal.
So it's kind of that classic, like, you're not doing your SDR work properly unless you sometimes get a little bit of a frustration answer, because you kind of have to go to that edge to test and also increase, how important it is for increased win rates to do that. So you're basically having a bigger risk single threading. It's kind of what you're saying here, right? So just to set the scene here, we're doing this What's the Deal with Digital Sales Room. We're inviting different experts to talk about different elements that touches upon the use of digital sales rooms. In this case, it's multi-threading. And in short, I just want to quickly set the scene on why we're doing it, because basically GetAccept created the category back in 2021 of this digital sales room. And we're the category leader as of today, along with some other great solutions like Aligned and Allego. When you're talking about the B2B buyer journey today, one of the reasons digital sales rooms exist is to simplify and ensure that this process that you see in front of you here becomes more simple for the buyer to navigate through and for the seller to guide them through, by having a one-place microsite that has all information and content and all stakeholders in one place to make sure everybody's on the same page, moving at the same direction, ensuring everybody's aligned. And when we're talking about the different levels of how you get started with a digital sales room, because probably some people are thinking like, well, okay, that sounds interesting, but how do I do it? Well, you can really start with just uploading and sharing your existing content today in just one space. And then you can start to see the tracking analytics and understand what is happening outside of my meeting, what is happening when I'm not with the buyers, how are they engaging in it. And you can start to then move up by building live templates in, for example, GetAccept. You can build digital sales rooms and assets. So everything is there ready for you, and you can just edit and tweak it and personalize it as you go through the sales process. And then the third one is that's when you really connect with, for example, your enablement team, and you say, okay, we're following a MEDDPICC and a SPICE framework, and we really want to make sure that we're in a situation where all our sales reps are working structured. So now you're not just having this as a part in your CRM or in your Gong, you also have it as part of what is the buyer facing part. So you actually align it with how to guide the buyer to buy based on how you also want to sell in the methodologies you know are effective. So it really makes this alignment and efficiency and structure for sales reps much, much more clear. Of course, all this can be connected with your CRM with basically a few hours of setup, either by yourself or with our team. So back to the task at hand, multi-threading, impact on win rates. I teased a little bit earlier today with that there are some very interesting numbers on it. And to be fair, this is pretty crazy to see, you know, the 161% increased chance of win rates of winning a deal when you start to multi-thread with more than 3 people between the first and the second call. Cameron, I need to ask you here, like, how are your team handling this today? Because this is, to me, just crazy if people are not doing it today. And this is really like, this is based on Gong's own data.
Yeah, Gong is huge on, you can imagine, data and always running analytics on what will help us win more often. And so once we figured out that there's such a high or win rate when we do engage more stakeholders, that's a very natural part of the process now. So within Gong's functionality, we have a deal board, and that will pull the number of contacts that you're working with. And it's not just the number of contacts that are in your CRM today, but it's actually the number of contacts in the past 2 weeks that you've had some sort of engagement with. So whether it's an email, a call, we're starting to, try to integrate with more digital sales rooms. So interactions in there as well, that will indicate that you've actually worked with that person, and it increases the number of contacts. So that's one of the biggest fields within Gong that we're going in and we're flagging with our leaders is how many contacts are you working with? Is it over a certain number? And depending on the size of the organization and the number of stakeholders that you've identified that are going to be really significant to work with, that's a really, heavily monitored part of our workflow. So it's huge at Gong. It's one of the biggest things that we focus on.
Gotcha. Well, and I think it's a red flag if you, after that first meeting, don't have that as a next step to try multi-thread. So, I mean, I saw some data as well from Gong Labs. That's something we can always share. But essentially, it said something about if you do not involve a decision maker, and we're talking deals below, this is below 100K, there's a 80% decreased chance of winning that deal. But if we're talking deals above 100Ks, it's a 233% decreased chance of winning a deal if you're not talking or engaging with a DM. And this decision maker obviously is easier to get a hold of if you started to multi-thread and getting to widen your, business case, your proof of value, your proof of, view. So you actually have this resonating problem statement you can share with them to get them engaged, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the pro tips that I've pulled from some of the really great reps at Gong is knowing the stakeholders' first names. So if I get on a call with you, Matthias, and I really want to meet with, another leader at GetAccept, I will, and this will kind of tease into the demo that I'll walk through, but knowing the first name of the person that I want to reach out to at the beginning of the call helps so much with controlling the ability to multi-thread. Because, I could come in and ask you, hey, is there anyone else I should meet with? If you say no, I have no confidence in pushing back. But if I know those titles, their names, if it shows that I did my research, and I think it allows for a more comfortable environment for you to then share, hey, who would be like the decision maker that you really should meet with here? Gotcha.
Makes perfect sense. And we're going to go into that right now. But very firstly, I just want to give everybody on this call a chance to screenshot this. This is something you could use when you're talking internally after this webinar with whoever decides what you're going to look into. of reasons to use multi-threading on another level than just LinkedIn and email and using it through a digital sales room. But I think this little walkthrough with Cameron is also going to give you a very clear understanding of how that is. And of course, this is all being recorded. So you'll get the recording after to ensure that you'll get this little snippet of information. But I've been super excited for this, Cameron, because this is, for me, the meat of the session here. This is where I take a person like you and get educated on how to use our own platform, but on the best practices that you've been doing when you put yourself in the shoes of being a Gong sales reps and a formidable one of them, and then presenting a Gong to, let's say, GetAccept in this case, which is the dummy we've created. So take me through. First step, what would you do?
Yes, I'm very excited. I'm very proud of my deal room, so I love showing it. So the first thing I always do, and this is just something that I make on my own and like a slide, and then I will pull into the deal room, but is I love to make an org chart. I think visually it's so helpful working internally, working with a champion, just to know based on who I typically work with in an organization, who's going to be really important to get in front of. And again, it's okay if this is wrong. There's almost kind of like a beauty in that, because then you can continue to validate it with people. And so how I'm doing this today is I have a template that I'm using. It's generally having a pretty similar structure of, highest DM into typically who would be part of the decision-making process. I'm using this from LinkedIn. I'm pulling different people. And then what I want to do is continue to validate this. And so my goal is to meet with the highest level stakeholders possible within an organization and in this org chart. But it's okay if anyone on this would be awesome. If I can just get some insight into who I should meet with, if this org chart feels good, what are some of their priorities. But really, once you have a champion, lean into them and make sure that this feels accurate, but also continue to update it. So you can see I kind of have a key on the left side of just keeping track of who have I met with, who is it really important? Like, who is my champion told me that I need buy-in from? Who do I feel like is a supporter? So you are kind of ever evolving this org chart, so it can kind of come back and be the reference again internally, but also with your champion to see, are you in the right place? So that's the first piece, is I'm building this org chart, and this becomes very foundational for how I think about including people into this room.
Gotcha. So we found a champion. Now we're going to put some information in it. We're going to get some sort of strategic content to help that person get you to connect it to some obviously more interesting people, but like also just how do you build that first meeting up with sharing information before the first meeting? What are you doing at this stage?
Yeah, definitely. So I think one of the great things about GetAccept is I can have a template. So I've started to create these from organizations, and it has very baseline, like, what is Gong? Competitors in your space that I can go in and edit really easily. It's our pricing, it's an MSP. So once I have those things built out, it's really easy to start adding people to a room in a way that feels pretty scalable. It's not, I'm spending hours and hours creating these every time. And so what that starts to look like is I can come into here, and without knowing too much about their priorities or what that particular person is caring about, I can pull in, and just based on what I know from doing research on the company, I can create things. So, hey, like, here's companies that we work with in your space. Here's different case studies around them. So again, this is content that I can make before I've met with anybody, but it helps me drive when I'm trying to reach out to people and get a meeting. It really helps me drive them to a place where it's not really realistic for me to be sending them 10 different emails with like, here's one case study, here's another case study. And it's also not realistic to send them an email that has this much content. So more often what I'm doing is I'm trying to direct them to this room. So I'm sending them emails, I'm messaging them on LinkedIn, and it's a really short note. It's just like, hey, this is where I'm reaching out. I would love if you checked this out. So again, it's driving them to a place where most people are a little resistant to meeting, even if the tool is something that they're interested in or if they've heard of before. And so what's really helpful for me, again, is having short little notes to them that feel not so invasive, that directs them to a place where then when they come into this room, I can start to chat them. So, I can see who's entering this room. I can see all the activity here. And then I can start to send different notes to people to say, hey, I saw you join. I would love to schedule some time with you, or do you have a question on this page, or hey, was this interesting? Again, it just allows me to have a little bit more engagement as I try to get that first meeting.
Yeah. And what is the absolute must-haves when you're having this first person in? Like, is it a link to your calendar? Is it a quick video explainer? Is it always the Gong customer you're sharing? Like this is the people in our space. What is your go-to?
My go-to, I think, is just a quick overview. So we have a 3-minute product demo. I love that one. I think it gives a really good overview. It's from a sales engineer point of view too, so it hits a lot of the technical pieces. I would say, I had my methodology. I think when I think about selling to someone who may not know Gong, is keeping it as simple as possible. So how can, in very few resources, they get a general feel for what Gong can help them solve for versus every single feature that we would offer. So that 3-minute product demo, and then people are always really interested in how are similar companies using this, or are similar companies using this? And so again, the two that I would add is that quick overview of what Gong is, what they do. And then from here, it's how are companies like yours using us today? Because I think that gives people an idea of what are some use cases that maybe they don't initially think of when they think of Gong. But ideally, once you have a few of these in here, the likelihood that one of them resonates is pretty high.
Okay. And what do you do then to redirect the person to that information? Because it seems like quite dense information here. There's a lot of it. I know, because I know the platform, that you can hide stuff, so it's not as crazy with a lot of information at the first step. But if you were to direct someone into this room at a later stage, for example, how would you do that?
Yeah, definitely. So there's a couple things that I really like using. If, for example, I meet with a head of RevOps, so at GetAccept, I met with Federico. He was like, hey, I love MedPick. MedPick is so important to me. It's really what I care about. You can either do this beforehand. If I could go into Federico's LinkedIn today and see that he's huge on MedPick, and without even having to meet with him, know that that's something that's really important to him. Or after a meeting, you can also add this kind of content, but you're going to highlight it. And then what I do is I'll just tag them here. So I'll literally tag him and just say, hey, check this out. I think you would really be interested in this. To your point, Matthias, it's a lot of content. This is kind of counterproductive to a simple place that they can go to. So if I can do anything to help direct them here, it's highlighting a certain area, or if I create a new piece of content, then I can publish it, and I can also notify one person, the entire group. But I think it's a great way to just more clearly direct someone to a piece of content that I think would get them excited versus hoping that they look through all of this, which they probably wouldn't do.
Yeah, makes sense. I have Natalia here asking, do you share the deal room during the outreach already?
Yes, definitely. So I won't have this much content. As you can see, there's a lot here. And a lot of it's pretty, I would say, specific to conversations that I've had. But yeah, I want to share this as early as possible, because I think, again, I'm adding some more foundational pieces of, what is Gong? Why do I think it will be helpful for you? How are companies in your space using it based on what I've researched? So it's going to be more foundational than this, but I definitely want to share it during my initial outreach as a place where they can go and just learn more about Gong versus, our website that doesn't feel as customized to them.
Okay. So we're fast forwarding now. You had a good first meeting with your potential champion. You're still figuring that out. And now the data is telling us here is where if we multi-thread to +3 people, we start to see this big impact on win rates, the chances of it at least going towards continuing instead of it ending up single threading at someone that is just not, having the power internally, or has the help to do the task this has to do it. Maybe he needs to talk to more people. She needs to invite other people. How do you make it easy for them? How do you do it, and how do you choose what information to share at this stage?
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit of an extension of the workflow that I just showed you guys, where it's adding content, from that initial conversation, but having it be a little bit more customized and then continue to tag them. I think this feels, again, more invasive than me sending, 4 different emails, asking them to meet and referencing and asking for an intro. If I can direct them here, and if I can maybe tag the person that I met with and new person that I'm trying to reach out to, that's really helpful. So what it would look like is I will pull from conversations that we've had. So if I have a first call with someone, it's like, hey, this is what I already know about what you really care about. So automatically, any other stakeholder that I add in here, this is going to resonate, because it's like, hey, this is what I talked to your team about. This is what you care about. So when I create this content, I'm going to publish it and I'm going to tag everyone. So within here, I'll change a certain piece of it so you guys can see it. I would come in here and I would save this. And then once I publish it, then I can go in and I can kind of announce it to different people.
Okay.
So that's one way that I think about it.
Yeah.
And then I'll also add snippets from calls. So this is Gong functionality to be able to pull a particular snippet of a call. And then you can see here, this is kind of what we're starting to build out, is the ability for this to get pushed back. But this will create just a quick summary. Again, the name of the game is simplicity. And so even though this is like a 3-minute snippet, they still might not go in and watch this. But I want to pull based off of what different stakeholders might care about that came up in that first conversation, have the summary here, have the recording, and then tag that person. So again, I can come in here and I can actually comment and tag different people to say, hey, this is, knowing that you are working on rolling out a new campaign as a product marketing person. I thought this would be really interesting, how we help you track adoption and effectiveness.
And I think we're tapping into this because I think one of the things that people ask me a lot is, how do you keep steering the pot? How do you keep having, buyers engaged? How do you keep having this room as a place they go to and live? Again, how do you actually share value in between those meetings? Because, sometimes they'll be like, yeah, it's not a priority right now. Reach back to us in 3 months. And then, if you don't do anything in between that to nurture, then chances are you're probably not being top of mind during that period. So how do you stay top of mind? What is your tips here? I think that's something that is very interesting to hear.
Yeah, I think it's inevitable that you're going to have some deals that will push, and it may not be anything that you did. It might just be shifting priorities. And so I think the deal room is such a good place for that, because again, it's keeping Gong top of mind while they still have all of the other shifting priorities, but it doesn't feel quite as invasive as like, hey, here's this case study, like sending emails periodically feel a little bit more invasive, where I will just start to add different pieces of content into here that, product feature updates from our side, or new case studies that we come out with, or if we have an event like we just did Celebrate, there's so many amazing sessions. It's like, hey, I'm going to add little snippets and I'm going to continue to drive them to this page. And so again, it's hard to keep people engaged when there are so many shifting priorities and it just might not be the right time. But knowing they can always come back to this room and that there are little email notifications that they're getting that are pushing them here, and usually curiosity will kind of take over, and then they'll come back into the room and want to check out what's new, and maybe it aligns better with their more current priorities.
Yeah. So essentially, you're trying to take all this content that you're sometimes seeing from marketing or from other departments that could be put into here based on your conversations. So you're trying to be very thoughtful, I would say, a thoughtful seller, a conscious seller. So really giving that white glove treatment to those right deals. Obviously, you can't do this for all SMB deals out there. So you have to be like, a deal that is plus 100K would probably be worth it. A deal in 10K might have to be a little bit selective on how white glove you do it, right? But I'm thinking, if we were to say, multi-threading never stops, right? But when do you start to, when you come to this commercial agreement, how did you handle the relationship with the people that are involved in the closing line? Do you like reach out to them and thank them? So like personally, I myself has done that quite a lot, where I've been like, if I got some information below the line, I kept them in the loop, and I, because it kind of reciprocated back to me in a way. So it was easier to keep getting new information.
Yeah, I think it's always great. I mean, people will help you so much throughout a sales cycle, even if they're not going to be the final decision maker. If you can get them excited about Gong and bought in, they will help you, get you connected with the right person or give you insight into the process. And so thanking them for that, I think it just goes so far, especially if they do become customers and you do continue to work with them. So usually I'm going to be chatting people to kind of close out conversations. I'll follow up if there was a particular question that they had. But for the most part, it's like, hey, thank you so much for being such a great resource. I'm so excited the potential to still partner. Let me know if you need anything. I'll connect with them on LinkedIn. And so you have a different couple avenues if they are interested in continuing, to use you as a resource. But I do think that's an important way to close it out. And then one thing I didn't get to mention that I'll mention really quick is when you think about engaging more stakeholders at Gong, something that we do really heavily is being able to jersey match. And so pulling someone from our product team or customer success team and having them meet as many people that you can get bought into the tool as possible from the buying side is really important. So I also use this content internally, and I'll share it with, our VP of customer success if they're going to meet with someone at GetAccept from the customer success side. And it saves them and I so much time for them to just be able to come in here and click around and see. And then when they go into that meeting, they're far more well prepared on what are the conversations, what's important. So this is not just a resource, I would say, externally when you're selling, but it's also such a good resource internally.
Yeah, to support that team selling. So basically multi-threading goes both ways here. We're multi-threading easier to our internal team, and we're also multi-threading easier to our external team by having this place where all context comes into one room, and it's easier to get on the same page, especially when you start treating it with what we've learned so far, a business case, mutual action plans, all this. So whenever, I go in and I look at this technical information, I could easily be caught into, oh, by the way, what is actually the business case here? And then all of a sudden you might actually have a backer that came from technical that wasn't really necessarily involved in any meetings around the business case, right? Makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
So a scenario question, no one engages. What do you do?
It's a tough one. And I think, with how many rooms I've tried to build out to, that does happen a little bit. I think lean on your champion. Again, I think that's just a great way to do it, and ask them for some advice. So hey, is the content that I'm sharing not customized enough? Is there something I could be doing differently? But I think any interaction that you can have, do it in the deal room. So if you happen to get a meeting with them, then put every follow-up item into here. Or if you want to send them an email, instead just chat them in here. So drive as much interaction into this deal room as possible, because chances are they will need some piece of content. And once you can get them in here, then they will start to poke around, because it's like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Oh, I didn't think about that. Or pricing is listed here, and I always want to share that really early with people. And so as much as you can, if they ask a question or if they ask for a piece of content, share it in here. And instead of emailing it to them, they may have reached out to you, say hey, here's the link to the deal room. It's in here. So I think those are the two things that I would think when it is hard. Some people just aren't familiar with sales rooms too, so they might not be, comfortable going into them. So as much content as you can use will be really helpful.
Makes sense. So if anybody asks pricing on email, you give them the pricing, but you do it in the digital sales room, and then you send out an email after with hey, here's the link with the pricing I've updated for you. So you kind of, again, educate them to go in to see this is the single source of truth, just like we've been trained as CRM is the single source of truth for internal information.
Exactly. And I think I even do that early too. So it's when I have pricing in here, I love that I can create this pricing setup within GetAccept today. And once I have this in here, I'll tag as many decision makers as possible early on. So it gets them in the deal room earlier versus, struggling to get them in there. Most people want to see pricing and they want to see it early. And so I want to be as transparent as possible and pull it in here, beginning conversations, tag anyone who might want to see it, and that'll drive engagement as well.
Gotcha. No, I appreciate that. Super good tips. I have a few questions here from the people. Ted, I think we answered it earlier, that building a champion before multi-threading. But Cameron, do you want to maybe answer it? Because sometimes you don't have a champion. But you're probably still multi-threading, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's definitely something you can still do without a champion. A champion, I think, just gives you some direction. But yeah, absolutely. It just takes a little bit more research. And so you're going into, maybe their LinkedIn or their role and trying to understand the website. What would maybe resonate with them? What would they care about? And then I think in terms of building a champion, it's trying to identify someone in the business who does feel bought into Gong, whether they've used it before or if, and upon a first meeting, it seemed like they were pretty engaged. That's the way I think about at least building the champion. And then doing this without a champion is just doing a little bit more research and, maybe having a couple more initial touch points to try to get someone engaged. And then from there, it's just really working to build a champion who will help you advocate internally.
Yeah. And to answer that as well, Ted, you can actually use the digital sales room when you share content with people to also test, how engaged are they? Because based on the analytics, you will obviously get some revelations. If there actually are, if they're spending 15 minutes on this, maybe it will be worth having a chat with them instead of the person that only spent 30 seconds on it, to get those insights. So this is a little tip that we've used over the last 5 years, I feel like. Camille, you're asking about pro tips and strategies to increase success post closing for customer success teams. I don't know if you have any experience with that yet, Cameron.
Yeah, I haven't experienced it too much in a deal room. I think the way that I would think about using it specific to this is, I mean, the customer success side can come in there and they can also see everything that you've built out. So is that the question? Is like internally customer success or selling to customer success?
Let's give that to Camille and we'll wait. I think it's post closing for customer success teams. So increase strategies to increase success post closing. Yeah, good question. Camille, maybe you can clarify it. Catherine, you can talk about the internal tracking and admin views you use. Yeah, so I can take that. Internal tracking is just based on people that are visiting. So we can see however they're engaging, how much they're spending time on it, what page they're looking at, what resource they're looking at, and we can index it as well. And we have a timeline over what is happening. So it's very easy to get that overview from an admin point of view. So when you go into one of your sales reps rooms, you can actually see all the history. Super easy, like having an insight into analytics on a very high level or a very deep level, I mean. Frederick, is there a way we can, as salesmen, test out the sales room customer experience? Yes, I'll probably reach out to you after that. Makes sense. Goal is to grow as much as possible post-closing. Gotcha. So you're talking about making it better for the customer or for the internal team. If it's for the customer success internally, what we're doing best practice internally is that we create a room, the digital sales room based on the whole sales process, and then we have a handover to our AMs and CS team, and we have like a new what do you call it, like a new chapter in the room that is opened up where there's like the onboarding, the timeline. Normally that is already being presented in our mutual action plan and in like an implementation plan. But then we also have a set up with QBR feedback sessions, all that, and we can really show. So what we've seen is that when you're talking about upselling or cross-selling or retention and churn protection, then it's really effective because it's super easy to everybody to get on the same page. Even if it's a new CFO coming in, then he can see, oh, this is what we bought, and the new CMO, she can see, oh, this is what we're paying for this solution, and we're basically in a situation where this is what they brought us. This is the M1s. This is the success stories they shared. So it can be a full active living room that can both support you for the external information to help you upsell across, because it's easy to share this room, just like in a sales process, but for the existing business. And it's also a way, as Cameron mentioned before, when you're talking about multi-threading internally to get a VP sales on the same page as you. If you're meeting up with a VP sales, you can do the same for the customer success. So it's super easy as a handover process, instead of having a lot of like, this is what we talked about in the CRM, then here's the room, this is what we sold them, this is the M1s we shared to get them here, this is the key objectives. So again, all that information is much more visualized, easy to capture for your team internally as well. I think we covered all questions. I want to give a special thanks to everybody that has been watching, both from previous webinars and on this one. We're going to take a little Christmas break and be back in the new year with what's the deal with digital sales rooms. And Cameron, a special thanks to you for championing this, for being such a fun person to be educated by, such a skillful person, and I'm just super excited to see where you're taking President's Club H2 this year. And again, for everybody that are not yet following you, where can they find you? How do we keep following your tips and information?
Yeah, mostly LinkedIn. I'm getting definitely don't have a history of being very good about posting on LinkedIn consistently, but just Cameron Adams on LinkedIn. And I'm definitely will continue to kind of share tips here. I think this has been such a fun tool to get to use, and I've already felt it up level my skills so much. So it's easy to talk and rave about.
Yeah, and I think the digital sales room is still a new category. So I think an important note on the end here is feel free to reach out. if you have any questions or concerns about how to do this, how to adopt it or anything, we have a lot of years of best practices, a lot of trial and error. If you were to buy the pizza, you would also ask the Italians how to do it. And in this case, we're the Italians. So we have a DSR playbook coming out now that gives you access right after this webinar. It includes all Cameron's actionable tips and tactics. And in there, you also have the opportunity to spit any other questions. And if you have any from this webinar or things that just comes to mind, and I'll be there to answer them. So Nick, my advice is share your question in there as well, and I'll meet you in there and answer it more in depth. Thank you so much, everyone.